The air crackled with menace as the roar of motorcycle engines died down, replaced by the jeering laughter of men who thought power came from cruelty. At a lonely gas station on the edge of a nowhere town, 17-year-old Amara stood frozen, her heart pounding like a war drum. She was just a girl trying to fill her beat-up pickup truck, but to the 6 bikers circling her, she was a target. Amara's dark skin glistened with sweat under the Georgia sun, her tight curls pulled back in a practical ponytail. She'd driven this route 100 times, hauling supplies for her grandmother's farm, but today felt different. The bikers, clad in leather vests emblazoned with a snarling wolf, had rolled in moments ago, their eyes locking onto her with a predatory glint. "Hey, sweetheart," one of them sneered, his voice dripping with venom. "You sure you belong here?" The others laughed, their boots scuffing the gravel as they closed in. Her hands trembled on the gas pump, but Amara's voice was steady. "I'm just getting gas. Leave me alone." She didn't look at them, focusing instead on the nozzle, willing it to fill faster. But the leader, a wiry man with a graying beard and a scar slicing his cheek, stepped closer. "Don't get uppity, girl," he spat. "This ain't your place." The racial undertone wasn't subtle, it was a blade, sharp and deliberate. Amara's breath hitched, but she wasn't alone. From the bed of her truck, 2 sets of eyes glowed with quiet intensity. Titan and Shadow, her German shepherds, trained by her late father, a military K-9 handler, watched every move. Their ears were perked, muscles coiled, waiting for her command. She'd raised them from pups, trained them with the same discipline her father had instilled in her. They weren't just pets, they were soldiers. The bikers didn't notice the dogs at first. They were too busy feeding off each other's bravado, their taunts growing louder, uglier. "Go back to where you came from," another barked, his face twisted with hate. A bottle sailed through the air, shattering at Amara's feet, spraying her sneakers with glass and cheap beer. She flinched but didn't run. Running was surrender, and Amara didn't surrender. "Last chance," she said, her voice low but firm, her hand inching toward the whistle tucked under her shirt. The bikers laughed harder, oblivious to the shift in the air. Titan growled, a deep rumble that vibrated through the ground. Shadow's hackles rose, her eyes locked on the scarred leader. The men froze, finally noticing the dogs. "What the hell?" one muttered, stepping back. Amara's lips curled into a tight smile. "You should have walked away." She blew the whistle, a sharp, piercing note that cut through the tension like a gunshot. Titan and Shadow launched from the truck bed, moving with terrifying precision. They didn't bark or snap wildly, they were trained for control, not chaos. Titan pinned the leader to the ground, his massive paws on the man's chest, jaws inches from his throat. Shadow flanked another biker, her teeth bared just enough to show she meant business. The gas station clerk, a wiry old man named Gus, poked his head out, eyes wide. "What's going on out here?" he shouted, clutching a broom like a weapon. Amara didn't take her eyes off the bikers. "Just teaching some folks manners," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her veins. The leader squirmed under Titan's weight, his bravado gone. "Call them off," he gasped. "We didn't mean nothing." Amara crouched down, meeting his eyes. "Didn't mean nothing," she echoed, her voice cold. "You meant every word. You thought you could scare me because of how I look. You thought wrong." She stood, signaling the dogs to hold their positions. The other bikers didn't dare move. The air was thick with the weight of their fear, the tables turned in an instant. Amara's heart still raced, but she felt something else now, power, not the kind the bikers craved, but the kind that came from standing her ground. This wasn't just about her. It was about every time she'd been stared at, whispered about, or followed in a store. It was about the stories her grandmother told of marches and beatings, of a world that tried to break people like her. It was about her father, who died overseas believing in a country that didn't always believe in him. Amara wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for them. She took a deep breath, her voice rising. You don't get to decide where I belong. This is my home, same as yours. You don't like it? That's your problem, not mine. The bikers stared, some with shame, others with defiance, but none spoke. Titan's growl underscored her words, a reminder of the consequences of crossing her. Gus shuffled closer, his broom still raised. You okay, kid? He asked, his voice softer now. Amara nodded, her eyes never leaving the bikers. I'm fine. But these guys need to leave. She whistled again, a different note, and the dogs backed off, returning to her side with the same eerie precision. The bikers scrambled to their feet, muttering curses but avoiding her gaze. The leader lingered, his face a mix of anger and humiliation. This ain't over, he growled, but his voice lacked conviction. Amara tilted her head, unflinching. It is for you. The dogs growled in unison, and he backed away, climbing onto his bike. The others followed, their engines roaring to life as they peeled out, leaving a cloud of dust and the stench of defeat. Amara exhaled, her knees weak but her spine straight. Gus approached, shaking his head. You're something else, kid. Those dogs, they're something else too. She managed a small smile, patting Titan's head. They're family. As she finished pumping gas, Gus handed her a bottle of water. On the house, he said. You handled that better than most would've. Amara took it, her hands still shaking slightly. Didn't have a choice, she said quietly. But she knew that wasn't true. She'd had a choice: either cower or to fight. She'd chosen to fight. Driving away, the dogs curled up in the truck bed, Amara replayed the moment in her mind. She'd won this round, but the war wasn't over. The world was still full of men like those bikers, full of hate that didn't need a reason. But she was ready. Her father had taught her to be ready. Back at the farm, her grandmother, Ruth, was waiting on the porch, her gray hair braided tightly, her eyes sharp despite her age. You're late, Ruth said, but her tone softened when she saw Amara's face. What happened, child? Amara told her everything, the words spilling out like water from a broken dam. Ruth listened, her face unreadable until Amara finished. Then she pulled her granddaughter into a fierce hug. You did good, she whispered. You did real good. That night, Amara sat on the porch, Titan and Shadow at her feet, the stars bright above the fields. She thought about the bikers, about their hate, and about the fire in her own heart. She wasn't naive enough to think one standoff would change the world, but it had changed her. She felt stronger, not just because of the dogs, but because she'd faced the ugliness head-on and walked away taller. The next morning, word of the gas station incident had spread through the small town. Some whispered about the crazy black girl with the killer dogs, but others more than Amara expected came by the farm. A neighbor brought a pie, saying, "Heard what you did. Takes guts." A local mechanic offered to fix her truck's rattling muffler for free. Even Gus showed up, a shy smile on his face, with a small wooden sign he'd carved himself. It read, "Courage Under Fire," in bold, uneven letters. Amara hung the sign above the porch, a quiet reminder of what she'd faced and what she'd proven. The bikers might come back, or others like them, but she wasn't afraid. She had Titan, Shadow, and something even stronger herself. Days turned into weeks, and the incident became a story told in hushed tones at the diner, the barbershop, the church. Some saw Amara as a hero, others as a troublemaker, but she didn't care. She kept working the farm, training her dogs, and studying for her senior year. She had plans: college, maybe veterinary school, a life bigger than this town. But she'd never forget where she came from or what it took to stand tall. One evening, as the sun dipped low, casting the fields in gold, a familiar rumble echoed in the distance. Amara tensed, her hand instinctively going to the whistle around her neck. Titan and Shadow perked up, their eyes scanning the horizon. A single motorcycle appeared, slowing as it approached the farm. It was the leader, the scarred man, but he looked different, smaller, somehow, without his pack. He stopped at the edge of the property, hands raised. "I ain't here for trouble," he called out. Amara stepped onto the porch, the dogs at her heels, silent but ready. "Then why are you here?" she asked, her voice steady. He hesitated, his eyes dropping to the ground. "What you said, it got to me. I was wrong." The words were clumsy, raw, but they carried weight. Amara studied him, searching for a lie, but found none. "Doesn't erase what you did," she said. "I know," he replied. "Just I'm sorry." He climbed back on his bike, glancing at the wooden sign above the porch. He nodded, almost to himself, and rode away. Amara watched him go, her heart a tangle of anger and hope. She didn't forgive him, not yet, but his words were a crack in the wall, a small victory in a fight that was far from over. She turned to her dogs, scratching their ears. "Good boys," she whispered. And to herself, she added, "Good girl." The days following the biker's apology were quiet, but Amara knew better than to trust the calm. The town buzzed with her story, each retelling adding a layer of myth. Some painted her as a fearless warrior, others as a reckless kid who'd provoke trouble. She didn't care for the labels. She was just Amara, trying to live her life in a world that kept testing her. Ruth watched her closely, her sharp eyes catching the way Amara's shoulders stayed tense, the way she scanned every car that passed the farm. "You can't carry it all, child," Ruth said one evening, her hands busy shelling peas. "What happened at that gas station, it's not your burden alone." Amara nodded, but the weight didn't lift. She felt it in every glance from a stranger, every whisper in the grocery store. The town was divided, and she was the fault line. School started again, and Amara walked the halls with her head high, ignoring the stares. Her classmates were a mix of awe and unease. A few, like her friend Maya, were fiercely proud. "You showed em," Maya said, her braids swinging as she punched Amara's arm playfully. "Those dogs are legends." But others kept their distance, their silence louder than words. Amara didn't blame them. Fear was a powerful thing, and her dogs, her protectors, were a reminder of how quickly things could escalate. The gas station incident had stirred something deeper in the town. At the diner, arguments broke out over coffee, voices rising about outsiders and troublemakers. Some defended Amara, citing her courage, others claimed she'd overreacted, that the bikers were just having fun. Gus, the gas station clerk, became an unlikely advocate, retelling the story to anyone who'd listen. "That girl stood her ground," he'd say, his broom propped against the counter. "Ain't nobody got the right to make her feel small." Amara tried to focus on her routine: school, farm chores, training Titan and Shadow. But the tension followed her. One afternoon, she found a note tucked under her truck's wiper blade: "Watch your back." No signature, just jagged handwriting that made her stomach twist. She showed it to Ruth, who crumpled it with a scowl. "Cowards," she muttered. "They don't scare us." Amara wasn't so sure. She started parking closer to the house, keeping the dogs near even during simple errands. The town's divide became impossible to ignore when a community meeting was called at the local church. The topic was vague, public safety, but everyone knew it was about Amara. She didn't want to go, but Ruth insisted. "You don't hide," she said. "You show em who you are." So Amara went, Titan and Shadow at her side, their presence drawing gasps and murmurs as she walked down the aisle. The meeting was packed, the air thick with sweat and judgment. The pastor, a soft-spoken man named Reverend Ellis, tried to keep order, but the room crackled with tension. A man in a flannel shirt stood first, his voice loud. "Those dogs are a menace. What if they'd attack someone innocent?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Amara's grip tightened on Titan's leash, but she stayed silent. Then Maya's mother, Ms. Carter, stood. "Y'all are missing the point," she said, her voice sharp. Amara was threatened. She defended herself. You want to talk safety? Talk about why she had to. The room erupted, some clapping, others shouting. Reverend Ellis banged his gavel, but it was Gus who quieted the crowd. He stood, his wiry frame trembling with conviction. I saw the whole thing, he said. Those bikers weren't playing. They wanted to hurt her. If it weren't for her dogs, who knows what would have happened. Amara felt every eye on her, but she met them all, unflinching. When the pastor called her to speak, she hesitated, then stood, her voice steady. I didn't want trouble, she said. I just wanted gas. But they came at me because of who I am. My dogs protected me, same as my daddy taught them to. If that scares you, maybe ask why they needed to. The room fell silent, her words hanging like a challenge. The meeting ended with no resolution, but it forced the town to confront its own fractures. Some approached Amara after, offering quiet support. Others avoided her, their disapproval clear. She left with Ruth, the dog's nails clicking on the church floor, and felt a strange mix of exhaustion and resolve. She'd spoken her truth. That was enough for now. Weeks later, the bikers returned, not the whole gang, just the scarred leader, whose name, Amara learned, was Ray. He came to the farm alone, his motorcycle idling at the gate. Amara watched from the porch, her hand on the whistle. What do you want? She called, her voice hard. Ray dismounted, hands raised again. I meant what I said before, he called back. I was wrong. I want to make it right. Amara didn't move, but she nodded for him to approach. He stopped at the porch steps, glancing at the dogs, who watched him with unblinking eyes. I ain't proud of who I was that day, he said. Been thinking about it. About what you said. I got a daughter, you know. She's about your age. Amara's jaw tightened. Then why'd you do it? She asked. Why'd you come at me like that? Ray looked away, his face etched with shame. Habit, he said quietly. Grew up hearing things, believe in em. Didn't think twice till you made me. He pulled a small envelope from his jacket and set it on the porch rail. It ain't much, but it's a start. He backed away, climbed on his bike, and left. Inside the envelope was a letter, scrawled in the same jagged handwriting as the threat. But this was different, an apology, clumsy but sincere, and a promise to talk to his crew, to try to change the way they thought. Amara read it twice, then handed it to Ruth. What do I do with this? She asked. Ruth's eyes softened. You decide what it's worth, she said. Forgiveness ain't weakness, but it ain't mandatory either. Amara didn't forgive Ray, not fully, but she kept the letter. It was proof that words could shift, that hearts could crack open, even if just a little. She started noticing small changes in the town too. The mechanic who'd fixed her truck invited her to his shop, showing her how to change her own oil. Ms. Carter organized a community watch, making sure no one felt unsafe at the gas station again. Even Gus started keeping a photo of Amara and her dogs behind the counter, calling it his lucky charm. As winter approached, Amara began applying to colleges, her dreams taking shape. She wanted to study animal behavior, to understand the bond she shared with Titan and Shadow. But she also wanted to understand people, why they hated, why they changed, why they stayed the same. The gas station incident had lit a fire in her, not just to survive but to question, to challenge, to build something better. One crisp morning, she took the dogs for a run through the fields, their paws kicking up frost. She stopped at the wooden sign Gus had made, its letters weathered but still bold, "Courage under fire." She traced the words with her finger, feeling their weight. The world wasn't fair, but it wasn't fixed either. She could fight for her place in it, and she would. That evening, she sat down with Ruth and wrote a letter of her own, not to Ray, but to the town. She posted it on the community board outside the church, where everyone would see it. I'm Amara, it began. I'm not your hero or your villain. I'm just a girl who wants to live without fear. My dogs protected me, but it's on all of us to protect each other. Hate's easy. Courage is hard. Choose courage. The letter sparked new conversations, some heated, some hopeful. People started talking about the town's history, its unspoken rules, its silent divides. Amara didn't expect miracles, but she saw cracks forming in the walls that had stood for generations. She saw neighbors sharing coffee instead of glares, kids playing together who'd never mixed before. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. As spring bloomed, Amara got her first college acceptance letter. She read it under the porch sign, Titan and Shadow sprawled at her feet. Ruth watched from the doorway, a proud smile on her face. "You're gonna change the world, child," she said. Amara laughed, but for the first time, she believed it might be true. The gas station incident faded into memory, but its lessons didn't. Amara carried them with her through college, through her work with animals, through every fight she faced. She learned that justice wasn't a single moment but a series of choices, each one a step towards something better. And she never forgot the dogs who'd stood by her, or the girl she'd been, staring down hate with nothing but her voice and her courage. What do you think? Where does justice begin, and how do we heal a divided community?